My toxic boss stole my work for years. I stayed quiet, gathered proof, and took his job without saying a word. He got fired. I got promoted. Revenge achieved. How I got revenge on the man who tried to ruin my life and made him beg for mercy. Let me take you back about 4 years ago to a time when I was just starting my career in digital marketing. I had just landed a job at a fast-growing startup. Nothing huge, but enough to make me feel like I was finally getting somewhere. I was enthusiastic, driven, and eager to learn. That's when I met Daniel, my mentor, or at least that's what I thought he was going to be. Daniel was charming, successful, and incredibly respected in the office. He took me under his wing, taught me the ropes, and even helped me navigate office politics. For a while, I genuinely admired him. I thought he was grooming me to take on bigger roles, to rise through the ranks. What I didn't realize was that I was just a pawn in his game. It started subtly. He'd asked me to send over draft presentations, which he'd later present to the leadership team as his own. At first, I didn't care. I was just happy to be involved. But then he began sidelining me in meetings, cutting me off, or taking over entirely whenever I tried to speak. He claimed credit for campaigns I developed entirely on my own, then criticized me behind closed doors to management. Eventually, I noticed that promotions were passing me by. I was doing all the work, pulling 60-hour weeks, while Daniel cruised along, reaping the rewards. The final straw came during our quarterly review. Daniel told HR that I had been underperforming, lacked initiative, and needed direction. I was stunned. I confronted him privately, thinking there had been some misunderstanding, but he didn't even try to deny it. He just smirked and said, "It's not personal, it's business." That's when I knew. I wasn't just a victim, I was a target. And Daniel had underestimated me. Badly. For the next year, I played the long game. I rebuilt my reputation slowly, strategically. I stopped arguing or defending myself. I just nodded, smiled, and did the work, quietly documenting everything. Every email he manipulated, every file he edited after I submitted it, every idea he stole, I logged it all. Then I started building alliances. I helped out co-workers with their projects, offered advice, and became their go-to guy when Daniel inevitably dropped the ball. I never spoke ill of him. I let them discover the truth on their own. Meanwhile, I enrolled in night classes, analytics, business strategy, leadership. While Daniel was out drinking with clients and making shallow connections, I was preparing for war. The perfect opportunity came 6 months later, when the company began considering candidates for a new department head. Daniel thought it was his. He'd been lobbying for it quietly, telling people he had it in the bag. What he didn't know was that I had already submitted my own application, backed by a portfolio of projects that bore my name and testimonials from people he'd stepped on. When I was invited to present my strategy to the executive board, I pulled no punches. I walked them through successful campaigns, budget improvements, workflow enhancements, all with data. And then I showed them a side-by-side comparison of the actual project contributors. One document had his name. The other had the proof that I had done the work. I didn't accuse him directly. I let the data speak. The CEO asked me one question. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" I looked him in the eye and said, "Because I wanted to be ready when it mattered." 2 weeks later, I got the promotion. Daniel didn't. He tried to play it cool, even congratulated me in front of the team. But behind the scenes, he spiraled. He started missing deadlines, showing up late, making sloppy mistakes. It didn't take long before HR launched a formal review into his conduct. Remember that documentation I kept? I turned it over, emails, Slack messages, even recordings from meetings where he claimed credit for my work. It was game over. Daniel was fired because 3 months later, no severance, no recommendation. His LinkedIn went silent. I heard through the grapevine he tried to start consulting business, but his reputation followed him. Meanwhile, I thrived. I restructured the department, brought in new talent, and doubled our campaign output within 6 months. The same people who once doubted me now asked for my input. My salary tripled in 2 years. I became the go-to speaker at marketing conferences. All because I didn't let revenge blind me. I let it guide me. The best part? Daniel once told me, "You're too soft for this industry. You don't have what it takes." He was right about one thing. I was too soft. But not anymore. Now, I know some of you are thinking, why didn't you just quit? Why not walk away from the toxicity? Because that's what people like Daniel count on. They count on good people giving up. But I wasn't going to let someone like him write the end of my story. I wrote my own ending, and it was glorious. Before all of this happened, I used to believe that if you worked hard and stayed loyal, good things would come to you. I was raised that way. My parents were both teachers. Integrity was everything in our house. We didn't lie. We didn't cheat. We worked harder than everyone else, and we earned our place. That mindset stuck with me when I entered the corporate world. I believed my work would speak for itself. I thought people like Daniel were rare exceptions, not the rule. But over time, I learned the hard way. Snakes don't slither in the open. They wear suits. They shake your hand. They call you friend. Daniel wasn't just a bad boss. He was a manipulator with years of practice. He knew exactly how to make you feel like you were crazy for doubting him. There was a moment, I remember it vividly, when I told him that one of our reports had been altered. I showed him the version I submitted. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I never received that. Are you sure you didn't forget to send it?" I checked the logs. I had the timestamp, the email, everything. But that seed of doubt he planted, it still made me question myself. That was his power. At one point, I considered quitting. Not just the job, the industry. I didn't want to live in a world where people like him won. But every time I saw a new intern walk in with that same eager expression I once had, I felt something shift. If I left, Daniel would just do it again. To someone else. Maybe someone not strong enough to fight back. So I stayed, not for revenge at first, but for survival. That survival slowly turned into strategy. I made myself indispensable. I learned the systems inside and out. I could do things no one else could because I spent nights studying after work while Daniel was out pretending to network. One day, a junior analyst named Mia approached me. She looked shaken. Daniel had publicly humiliated her during a team meeting, claimed her data was flawed. But she showed me her work. It was perfect. She was right. He had deliberately changed her spreadsheet before the presentation. That was the moment I knew it wasn't just about me anymore. I told her to keep her head down and to start documenting everything. I did the same. I built a digital vault, encrypted, off-site. I kept video clips, audio snippets, anything I could gather. I didn't plan to use it unless I had to, but I needed the insurance. Daniel had a way of flipping reality upside down. I needed irrefutable truth. Then came the merger. A large international firm was acquiring our company. There were whispers of layoffs, restructuring, new leadership. Daniel saw it as his golden ticket. He started cozying up to the new execs, trash-talking existing employees, including me. But this time I was ready. The new leadership team requested feedback from department heads and team members. It was anonymous. I wrote a detailed report, not just about Daniel's behavior, but with data, timelines, patterns, and cross-references. I didn't ask them to fire him. I asked them to audit the facts. 2 weeks later, they did. Quietly, discreetly, they pulled records, interviewed team members. Mia had submitted a report of her own. So had 2 others. The pieces began to connect. Daniel was called into a meeting. He didn't return. That afternoon, an email went out. Effective immediately, Daniel Smith is no longer with the company. There was no farewell lunch, no LinkedIn announcement, no goodbye. I stepped outside the building and took the longest breath I'd taken in months. The sky seemed bluer, the air lighter. In the weeks that followed, I was offered the role of director of strategy. Mia was promoted to lead analyst. The culture began to shift. Slowly but tangibly. People smiled more, stayed late less, trusted each other again. Sometimes, revenge isn't a dramatic moment. It's not fire and fury. Sometimes it's quiet, methodical, just, and when it's done right, it doesn't just take down the villain. It rebuilds the world they try to destroy. They say living well is the best revenge. They're wrong. Winning well and bringing others with you, that's the best revenge. The interesting thing about taking down someone like Daniel is how differently people react after it's over. Some people were shocked. They had no idea he'd been manipulating things behind the scenes. Others admitted they always felt something was off, but never knew how to prove it. Then there were the ones who had enabled him, whether out of fear or convenience, and they scrambled to rewrite history. They started telling stories about how they never really trusted him. Classic. I didn't call them out. I had no interest in revenge on everyone. My focus was rebuilding, not just the department, but the morale. We had been walking on eggshells for too long, afraid to speak up, afraid to fail, afraid to shine. I wanted that to end. I started weekly stand-ups, encouraged open collaboration, and pushed for transparency. Slowly, people started speaking up more. They shared ideas freely. No one feared they'd be stolen. Mia led a project that earned us international recognition. Another teammate, Josh, created an internal tool that saved us over $80,000 annually. Our team was thriving. But revenge stories don't end just because the villain is gone. Sometimes they try to crawl back. A few months later, I received a LinkedIn request from Daniel. No message, just the connection. I ignored it. Then he emailed me, said he wanted to clear the air, that he had made mistakes and wanted to apologize. I read it twice. It was well written, polite, even humble. But I knew Daniel too well. He didn't want forgiveness. He wanted redemption, or worse, information. I replied with one sentence. I wish you the best in your future endeavors. No more, no less. He didn't respond. I later found out he tried to get a job at a rival firm. Someone from our company was on the interview panel. They asked him about his termination. He lied. They had already seen the internal memo. Needless to say, he didn't get the job. Meanwhile, I was invited to speak at a global leadership conference. They wanted me to talk about ethical leadership and recovery from toxic environments. I stood on a stage in front of 3,000 people and told my story, not with bitterness, but with clarity. I didn't name Daniel. I didn't need to. I talked about patterns, about culture, about what happens when good people stay silent, and about what happens when they don't. After my talk, dozens of people came up to me. Some were crying. One woman said, "You just described my last 3 years." I thought I was the only one. That's when it hit me. What started as survival turned into strategy. What became strategy turned into revenge. But what came after that was purpose. I founded a mentorship group for young professionals navigating toxic workplaces. We meet monthly, share experiences, and strategize solutions. It's not therapy, it's empowerment. And it's growing. Daniel was a monster in my story, but he was also the match that lit the fire. Would I go through it all again? Honestly, yes. Not because I liked it, but because I came out the other side stronger, wiser, and far more dangerous to the next Daniel who tries to ruin someone else. So if you're listening to this and you got your own Daniel in your life, remember, you don't have to fight loud. You just have to fight smart. Take notes. Be patient. Build your power. Then strike when it matters most. And when you do, don't just take them down. Build something better in their place. Because that's what real revenge looks like. Several months passed, and the department kept growing. We hit targets the company had once considered ambitious, and then we shattered them. I started getting invited into higher-level strategic meetings, where real decisions were made, not just for marketing, but for the entire organization. It was surreal. One day, while walking to the office, I passed by the old conference room where Daniel used to hold his so-called team alignment meetings. I stopped and looked through the glass. The room was full of people collaborating, smiling, laughing. No fear, no tension, no walking on eggshells. In that moment, I realized the full weight of what had changed. I wasn't the same person who started this journey. I wasn't the quiet, overworked junior manager trying to prove himself. I had grown into a leader, and not just any leader, one who earned trust, delivered results, and protected his team from the very toxicity that almost broke him. Sometimes I still get messages from people who knew Daniel. A few still defend him. Most don't. A former colleague once told me, "I never thought he'd fall. I thought guys like that always win." I smiled and replied, "Only if we let them." There's a misconception about revenge, that it has to be explosive, destructive, cinematic. But the best revenge is steady. It's strategic. It's the quiet dismantling of someone's power, brick by brick, until they have nowhere left to stand. That's what I did, not just for myself, but for every person who's ever been pushed down, passed over, or made to feel small so someone else could shine. If you're still listening, here's my final message to you. The world is full of Daniels. You'll meet them in school, at work, maybe even in your own family. But you don't have to become like them to beat them. You just have to outlast them, outsmart them, outwork them. And when the time comes, let the truth do the talking. They'll dig their own graves. All you have to do is hand them the shovel. So stand tall, stay quiet, watch everything. And when you strike, make it final. The weeks turn into months, and the month into a full year since Daniel's departure. The story faded from office gossip, but for me, the lessons remained carved into stone. I stopped measuring success in titles and salary bumps. Those came anyway. I started measuring it in peace, in trust, in knowing I had built a place where people weren't afraid to come to work. I remember one afternoon, I caught Mia standing alone near the windows. She had that look, the one I used to have, quiet, uncertain, reflective. I walked over and asked her what was on her mind. She looked at me and said, "I didn't think it was possible to change a place like this, but you did. We did." It hit me harder than any applause or raise ever could, because revenge didn't just rebuild me, it rebuilt others. It turned victims into leaders, silence into confidence, fear into resilience. And that's the power of doing it right. Daniel's downfall wasn't just justice. It was a message that there are limits to manipulation, that eventually the truth will surface, that no matter how well someone plays the game, if their foundation is built on lies, it will collapse. Every now and then I Google his name, not out of spite, but curiosity. His online presence is minimal now. A few blog posts, an old LinkedIn profile, a forgotten speaking engagement listed on a dusty conference site. He's a ghost in the industry. Meanwhile, the people he tried to bury are thriving. And in the end, maybe that's what makes revenge so satisfying. Not the fall, but the rise that follows. Not the scream of the villain, but the calm of the survivor who didn't just survive, but conquered. So wherever you are in your own story, whether you're still in the storm or crawling from the wreckage, remember this. You don't need to destroy someone to win. You just need to outlast their lives with your truth. Let your actions become the evidence. Let time become the judge. And let success be the sentence they never saw coming. Your revenge doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real.